Good afternoon. Welcome to the West Side Story. I'm your host, John Casey. I want to apologize for this episode being a day late, and I'm also going to apologize in advance. It's going to run a little longer than most. The Supreme Court case decision this week is one that I have great concern about. In any case, we're not going to spend much time with the crime report, but there is a situation that I think we all need to keep an eye on. The California Political Fair Practices Commission is investigating Santa Clara City Council members Barbara Hadi and Raj Shahal. The matter under investigation is there's no question that the two of them attended a San Francisco 49ers game and didn't pay for admission. The question is the council members are claiming that they did that in an effort to view stadium operations and therefore they shouldn't have paid. Other members of the council are claiming, no, you just wanted a free football game. And that probably in itself would be kind of small news. But the San Francisco 49ers and the city of Santa Clara have been in litigation since shortly after the stadium opened about money matters, among other things. And the San Francisco 49ers, in an effort to put the whole thing to bed, have actually issued a settlement offer in the amount of $144 million just to make the whole thing go away. I think the language they use is admitting no wrongdoing, but they just wanted to get it cleaned up, and the offer has officially been presented to the city. The problem becomes, if indeed Hadi and Chahal were influenced by getting a free football game, do they really belong on an organization considering accepting that large a settlement? And I'm glad that's the California Political Fair Practices Commission problem, because I don't really know. However, there are a number of people who are very, very concerned about it. And you're going to see a lot more about this. And as I say, the Political Fair Practices Commission's got its work cut out for it. So that's our local hubbub for this week. I want to go into a Supreme Court case that has great personal meaning to me. There's a fella in 1954 lived in southern Massachusetts. His name was Dr. Sam Shepard. He and his father owned the only hospital in town. He was in his 40s. He was good looking. He was educated. He had money. He married a nice lady. They had a son named Chip. And over the years, it was determined that Dr. Shepard had had extramarital affairs, but Mrs. Shepard knew about them and chose to ignore them. Not sure why, but she did. So then we cut to the night of July 4th, 1954. The Shepards invited their next-door neighbors over to watch a movie with them. Dr. Shepard laid down on the daybed, kind of a couch affair, and fell asleep. So Mrs. Shepard and the neighbors watched the rest of the movie, and then she kind of escorted him out. It wasn't uncommon for Dr. Shepard to fall asleep like this, so nobody was too worried. At about 5:40 that morning, these same neighbors got a call from Dr. Shepard. They described him as disoriented, and they decided they couldn't get heads or tails out of him, so they better run over there and see what happened. Upon arrival, they discovered that Dr. Shepard's wife had been murdered. There was abysmal protection of the evidence, even by the 1954 standards. And the police's version of any one of these crimes is it had to be the spouse. So in short order, Dr. Shepard was arrested and brought to trial. During all of the interrogations and the trial, Dr. Shepard said repeatedly that there was a fuzzy-haired man running away from the house. And he believed that's the person who did it. Now, those of you who are old enough to remember the Fugitive TV show will remember that it wasn't a fuzzy-haired man, it was a one-armed man. And the reason that they did that is because by the time The Fugitive came around in the 70s, fuzzy hair was kind of in vogue and they didn't want people to get confused. So that was changed for the TV show. In any case, Shepard is brought to trial, and as I say, he's kind of a leader in the community. He's done a lot of good for the community. He actually keeps his hospital running, among other things. And the judge, whose name I have but I don't want to share at the moment, decided that this really was a time to use this new media of television. It was really in its infancy, but it had the ability to transport images across miles. And it's hard to believe, but at the time it was considered the latest and greatest. Long before the internet was even the president's nightmare or any of the rest of it, it was a new thing and very, very exciting, and people wanted to be involved in it. So all of the TV stations around decided they better send their people down to get first swat at it so they have good stuff for their viewers. And they did. And it became so chaotic that the judge moved the trial from his courtroom to the gymnasium of the local high school. And while an area was set aside for the news cameras, there was a lot of posing and taking of shots and really kind of a very, very bad approach. And the news media interfered with the actual trial on more than one occasion. And that trial started on October 18th, 1954. As I say, Dr. Shepherd was known for having outside the marriage affairs. The one going on when this happened was with Susan Hayes, who was actually an intern at the hospital. She testified in court that he had never promised to marry her and that she knew full well that Shepherd was already married. Very interesting. In any case, on December 21st of that year, the jury handed down a verdict of guilty in the second degree of murder, and the judge assigned the sentence of life in prison. Now, contemporaneous to all of this, there's a young attorney who's really trying to make his way in the world, a guy named F. Lee Bailey. For those of you who have ever wondered, the F stands for Francis, but he hated that name. In any case, there's this young attorney named F. Lee Bailey, and he joins the law firm that defended Shepherd and does everything he can to get involved in the case and is often seen at or heard at trials or motion hearings about the case. Shepherd continued to appeal the decision, saying that he was convicted unfairly. Well, in 1961, F. Lee Bailey had the case full-time. The original trial attorney had passed away, and Bailey was the man of the hour. And as I say, he was very young and very energetic and very smart. So he really busted his tail. He filed an appeal, and the trial court said, well, no, there's nothing there. The appellate court said, oh, yeah, there's something there. And the state appealed it to the U.S. Supreme Court. And they handed down their decision in 1966, so it took them a while to get to it. They reversed the trial court's decision and remanded the case back to the trial court and said, you need to retry this guy when it's not a media sideshow. And the district attorney, being a silly fellow, decided he would try and would actually try the case again. What they weren't planning on was the presence of this young F. Lee Bailey. And there's no question, even by people who don't like him, that Bailey went into this trial very well prepared. And he just tore up the prosecution. He had several pieces of the original evidence removed because they couldn't prove their validity. Probably the biggest one was the coroner had said in his summation in the coroner's report that the item used was a medical device. Bailey made him admit in court that they had never found the murder weapon. I mean, that's how bad this case was. In any case, F. Lee decided that this was something he wanted to do, and the case was adjudicated by the trial court, and they said, well, you know what? He isn't really guilty. So he was set free. While he was in jail, he had been corresponding with a lady who was just dead up in love with him and very much afraid of what would happen to this man she cared about. They got married the day he was released. The story is, I have not verified this, but the story is that they wanted to go to Temecula to Earl Stanley Gardner's ranch, but in California, fornication was still a crime. So Bailey insisted they get married so they couldn't arrest him for fornication. And the case kind of goes downhill. There were 3 more divorces for Dr. Shepherd, and he had actually tried to go back to being a surgeon and discovered his skills had deteriorated drastically. In 3 weeks, he killed 2 people who shouldn't have died. So they got him out of that business real quick. He then appeared for a while as a professional wrestler. I remember when he came to the Cow Palace in San Francisco, it was a big deal. Dr. Sam Shepard. He also invented a new hold that had never been seen before, and they made a big deal of that. In any case, Dr. Shepard did pass away about 6 years later. At the end of the trial, F. Lee Bailey said something that really resonates with me. He described the prosecution's case as 10 pounds of hogwash in a 5-pound bag. I don't think anybody's ever had the nerve to use that one again. In any case, Dr. Sam Shepard died, they believe, of alcohol poisoning, and it's a very, very sad case, but it gets even worse. In 1997, their son Chip, you remember we talked about Chip at the start of this, Chip decided that his father's name was still being sullied as the person who had murdered his mother. So he sued. And one of the things he required during discovery for his suit was the DNA, and at this time they didn't really know what DNA was, but they knew what blood types were, that the blood be examined to make sure it really was Dr. Shepard's. They did that examination and discovered it wasn't Dr. Shepard's blood, and indeed he couldn't have done the murder. So even though he had been convicted 34 years previously, he was convicted wrongly. Very, very sad case in American history. Even worse, the fuzzy-haired man turned out to be the Shepard's house assistant, house maintenance man. And he and Mrs. Shepard were having an affair, and Mrs. Shepard had decided it had gone on long enough and wanted to break it off. So he came back to the house that night, saw Dr. Shepard asleep, apparently his wife asleep also, and killed her, and then left. He hurt his hand on the window on the way out, which is where the blood came from that led to the DNA test. This is a fascinating case. There is a lot of information about it on the internet, and I strongly suggest if any of this resonates with you that you check it out. Well, that's it for this week. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll see you next week. Please stay safe.